This is literally the essence of today's show, how to deal with it when it happens.
Have
Like Murphy's Law is like dealing with us. Like this is literally Murphy's Law.
this is okay. It seems like we are live. We are live now.
YouTube
So,
on.
yep, I think everything. So we're just waiting. Yeah, everything seems to be on. So I'm gonna keep that stream actually running there. So I'm gonna connect to the chat to make sure I can see everybody writing if they are online. Well, I'm gonna start. How's it, guys? And welcome to Getting to Grips, brought to you by Godox SA and Golden Power Batteries. So I have a very awesome gentleman to this side of me, Pakamani from the Eastern Cape. We're going to be discussing some topics and sort of addressing some sort of topics that are common challenges to photographers or creatives or videographers, because when things happen, you got to make a plan. You've got to get around it, or you've got to make sure that you have a backup plan in place. Obviously, no backup plan is foolproof. So we are doing the best we can, and with what we know and what we have. So hopefully you're going to learn some things today as what I've experienced. So all my wrongdoings, hopefully, will be sort of corrective enough for you guys to actually move forward and not make the same mistake. Yeah, we got nice music. Cool. So, Pakamani, well, welcome to Getting to Grips. How's it there in the Eastern Cape?
Hi, Carl. Thank you very much for having me on Getting to Grips. The Eastern Cape is actually quite good. It's not cold for some weird reason. We are starting in the middle of winter, but surprisingly enough, things are good.
Okay.
And how's things in Joburg?
We have our 4 seasons. So in the morning we have winter, then we have spring. By 12 o'clock it's summer, and then it goes back into winter again in the evening. So we've got our 4 seasons in Gauteng at the moment. That's our weather pattern in May at the moment. So I think today, you've probably got some things to probably share on some of these things as I go through them. I'm going to go through some different areas, and I will be sharing from my side, and I'm sure Pakamani will be sharing from his side of what he's experienced. So I want to discuss firstly about the importance of being prepared, or to actually have the plan in place. Now, obviously, most shoots that I do, I make sure I plan as best as I can, as best as I know, and have up backup plans. Now, the reason we got this show tonight is because my backup plan actually failed. So I normally have like 2 models for the live shoots, and both models were unavailable due to the fact of the flu that's going around. And I was in this total state, okay, because now I'm thinking 2 models, absolutely, there's going to be no show. I'm going to have to reschedule it. And I was just getting like blinkers on the side of my face like a racehorse, just not seeing any way out of this, or any way that actually probably then still get a live show on, making sure we're keeping the YouTube algorithms going with plenty of content. So by chance, I actually dropped a message on one of our Godox SA groups, and saying, look, I'm going to have to reschedule the live. I don't know quite what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to try and have to make a fill-up sort of video for this. And then Tara from Godox just put a little comment there. Speak to the guys. Speak to the team. And then it sort of hit me. And then Pakamani also sent me a message. And this is how this one was actually born. So having back having those relationships and that team behind you. We're lucky. I think we're lucky being part of the Go.SA team because we have people at the fingertips just on a WhatsApp message, and help is there, which is very cool. So that side of things, we are very, very lucky. I really enjoy having that team that's behind everybody. It's very important. So backup plans are important. What type of backup plans do you have, Pakamani, when you go out for a shoot?
Okay, so the type of backup plan, it's very hard at times to actually come up with a backup plan. And one of the reasons that is that we always strive for perfection. And, you never think about it at times. Because, for instance, I always have a plan for if it rains, this is what I'm going to do, because I do most of my shoots outside. So then it's like, it's raining. So what do you have to do? So having like a carport or something like that is always fantastic. Then you shoot there. But it's not always the most ideal because, at times it takes away from the actual vision that the client had. But the mere fact that you can improvise, it gives more or greater impetus in the terms of the client feeling a sense of, oh, okay, this person actually cares. And that's how clients need to always feel. They need to feel catered for. They need to feel that we do care. And most importantly, it's that feeling that you always leave a client with an experience that is different, the story that they can tell. And that's also, I think, what leads to great reviews. People then leave on your page, or someone sends you a message said, listen, I had this in mind, but what we ended up doing was absolutely fantastic. I'm really grateful for the way that you did things, so that for me works.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things that have actually happened to me. I mean, I've actually gone to a shoot. I think it was some sort of big luminous type birthday party thing, and they wanted us to set up a booth and stuff. So I actually took my 8300s, but I didn't take my S2 brackets, and I didn't put the little bracket actually in my 8300 case. So I went there, and my 8300 had no attachment bracket, but I had my C stands. So I literally had to actually screw the 8300 onto the C stand boom arm and actually use that to actually tilt my light. So it's all silly things like this, but we learn and make a plan and make sure we can still generate what the client wants at the end of the day. And I think another thing is, as I mentioned earlier, we were lucky about Go.SA having the team behind us. But building networks is one of the most important things you can do as a creative, because otherwise you are just left alone in your little space and your creativity dies. I feel if you're not connected to other creatives, I believe that your creativity will actually just dwindle out. And just for the fact that I could drop a WhatsApp message and actually all of a sudden an idea was sparked, and here we are tonight. Yeah. The fact that if I get double bookings in, or if I get an existing client coming in and they want to shoot at 12 o'clock, but I'm booked on a shoot at 11:30, I pick up the phone of one of the photographers that I know, and I say, look, I need a photographer at this venue. Can you do it for me? Are you available? Yes, cool. He goes there, does the shoot. I deal with the client, and I make a little bit on top, but he gets work and everyone's happy. So I think building those relationships, not just with obviously brands, with Go.SA, Canon, or whatever you build a brand, whatever brand you build with, other photographers. It's important to connect and build relationships with other photographers, because you never know when you would need another photographer, and rather have someone you have a relationship with, because otherwise I do this shoot and I've lost this shoot over here at 12 o'clock. I'm only doing the one at 11:30. I would have lost that one. Instead, get another photographer in there, bill the client pays the deposit. I book the photographer in, pay him the deposit, and then once the job is done, I pay him from that. So I'm still dealing with the client, but I have other photographers that I can use to actually put in other jobs. I think it's important around that type of thing. It's building that community, building that those relationships. I don't know what the Eastern Cape is like on that. It is quite tough, and I think it's only over a good amount of years in photography that I have built up some of those relationships. And what is the Eastern Cape like at the moment with photographers, community, and that type of thing?
Yeah, we have a very, we have a very quite diverse community, so you have your novice guys, you've got people who've been doing it for years, and you've got people who just in between. So leading on one's knowledge in terms of what people really want to do and the different genres that people actually get up to is also something that is extremely massive. So it's a very good thing to have that sort of variety, so you have your male creatives, female creatives. And I think one of the things when it comes to the learning curve and actually planning for things is also being able to sit back as a person and listen. And the beauty about listening is that's when you actually get to the soul of other creatives, to the soul of how do people do things? Why do they do them? And most importantly, how do I build me? And I think that is the one question that we don't really often get, which is how do I build me? So being able to build oneself is really something that is phenomenal, because also when it comes to your clients as a person, in terms of who you end up attracting, it becomes that sort of thing where they feel a sense that, we have someone who cares, we have someone who is willing to engage in our idea. Because it really happens, or what I've experienced, that you have a client that books you at a particular venue, and then they attach the label, this one is a professional photographer, or this one is an influencer. So immediately they back off, and then they say, you run the show. But you can't run the show because, it's someone else's day. You have to, how you fit in is how you add to that. And that's something that we as creatives at times need to learn. And that's where we actually learn from certain failures that actually happen. So it's easier then to adjust, because I'll make an example. When the clouds move and at times they block the sun and you need to take the shot, and that was a really beautiful spot. And all of a sudden you feel as though that you don't have that spot. So what is then the training that you've done over the years, or the simulation over the time you've actually been doing this, in terms of, I'll use that spot, but this is what I'm going to add to it in order to make it. So for instance, we've got our lights, we've got our reflectors, we've got filters, we've got quite a lot of things that we can use. But the question is, when something fails, how prepared are we when things happen that way? So it's been the craziest thing. So from my experience, it's always a simple situation that part of the planning that we need to do with our audience or clients is, let's plan, take a little notebook and say, okay, let's write. All right. So it's a very important thing, because at the end of the day, that's how you get delivery done. And you happy, they happy. Because if they're unhappy, because you're gunning for good reviews, So yeah, so when it fails, have a plan. And the other thing I'd just say, just in closing with this, is that colleague who always says, never make your lack of planning become someone else's emergency. So we plan for failures. We live in a country where load shedding, boom, lights go off.
Yeah, so we must get as many live streams we can get done before the end of the elections, because then we'll have power. Because it's yeah, look, I think also another big part of my planning stage is pre-shoot. pre-shoot meetings with the client. I mean, sometimes I have clients, which I've mentioned earlier when we were offline. I have a client that's in March booked for May. I had a pre-shoot meeting with him in March and got all the details also in your notebook or your iPad or whatever. Get all those details, know exactly what the client is actually expecting, and then you know what they want. They know what you can deliver and everything. So I've got another couple of pre-shoot meetings tomorrow with a musician and also another headshot one, and it's going to be different. I think the musician one is going to be quite a creative type shoot. So I'm going to be really enjoying that pre-shoot meeting to see how creative we can actually get on that. So pre-shoot meetings for me is a big part of my planning, especially when working in studio and stuff. So another thing is, obviously, coming back to the network side, is having networks with models. It's something that, I mean, I've worked with quite a few models over the last 16 years, and I mean, I often say this. I work with Donna, who I've worked with her for over 12 years. I mean, that's like absolutely crazy when you think how many years that you've worked with this one model. And we become good friends, and we respect each other's time. We respect each other's
important.
Yeah, because I know that she is busy. She knows that I'm busy, and we don't overstep boundaries. I mean, as I said, we've become very good friends, and it's been great. So I may have got a bit lazy on getting other models in onto the list because I had such a good relationship with Donna as a model. So I've actually had to start stepping out, getting. I mean, before it was very African model, a lot of African models, because I used to shoot for the Sunday Sunbabes competition many years back. So I had a lot of African models. Okay. Some of them were straight out the township in front of a camera. They've never modeled before, so it was really challenging sometimes, but built up a lot of contacts there. Then I was the Indian models, lots of Indian models I've worked with. Very funny enough, the white South African models I had hardly any experience with. It's only recently now that I've started working with a lot more white models now. So it's starting to build up those type of things. And now after yesterday, I was WhatsApping all these models. Would you be interested in appearing on live shows, workshops, and whatever? I'd like to add you to my list. So if I need somebody, I can give you a call. And a lot of them actually said yes. So I've got quite a big list now. So that was a good thing that came out of yesterday's failure. Well, not a failure, but hiccup, I'm going to call it. So I think it's important to actually have network with your models, brands, photographers, that whole community side of it. So if you do hit something, you can always reach out and get something going. Also about planning, it's probably just a little bit, it's not so much about people, but what if you had a shoot tomorrow at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, okay? And you were busy shooting, and all of a sudden you dropped your camera, and your camera went down under, couldn't be repaired. What do you do? Now you've obviously when you quote for a job, obviously you got to try and have some of these things in mind because it's part of your planning.
Yeah, I've actually had something like that happen to me. So basically, this is where planning becomes really essential, because here I was setting up my 8200. and on a light stand. And generally what happened, the shoot had been planned, everything. I knew exactly where I was going to put everything. But the one thing that I didn't count on was wind. And I've had people like, listen, just get sandbags, or just look where you're shooting, have a bit of a rope where you tie, so you know how the wind is going to work. So me being me, I was like, oh, okay. There's something that's really happening on my end. So what's happening is that I set up the softbox, and I had the 8200 on the S bracket, and then as I turned to pick up the camera, the wind blew. Boom! I just heard boom. I looked up, and yeah, my 8200 was down. I looked on the back LED, boom, no signal, tried pressing the trigger because I knew what group it was in. No, nothing. So I was like, okay, I've been down this road before. I've shot before without having to do off-cam flash. So let's go back to the basics. Which lens am I shooting with? What am I shooting? What's my scene like? So let me understand that, going back to basics. And I didn't even tell the client because I couldn't. So I couldn't just say, sorry, ma'am, my light just broke, and I can't exactly do the shoot. So it had to be a situation where I had to remain calm and deliver, because in that moment where I remained calm to deliver was the situation where I felt and said, oh, okay, that all is well.
Yeah. So it's very, can you hear me? Yeah. So it's okay. So it's very heartbreaking when that happens.
Yeah. No, the funny thing, we're having a conversation about this, and on my end, I'm smelling a bit of smoke. So I'm like trying to check the plug. There's nothing wrong with the plug there, because I was actually about to get up. So I just disconnected the thing from my plug. So I'm just trying to check around. Okay, is it the light? So if I went and switched this off, okay, boom. In the dark again, so these are the things, we're talking about failure and how to counter failure, and boom, okay, back comes my light. So
yeah.
It's crazy. But I've actually turned off the charging cable, but I do have enough power. I haven't actually had time to actually check what's really happening with the plug. We're live. So it's crazy. We talked about what would happen, and something might be happening.
I think it was also when we went live as well. We clicked the live button, but nothing was happening. It was like, okay, what now? So I don't think even the countdown actually happened. But anyway, these things happen.
Yeah. And, what do you do when it happens?
You mark a plan. But I think also when, I mean, maybe I should put this question out there to everyone that's watching is, when you quote for a job, are you actually quoting enough to be able to cater for loss? So all of a sudden now you're out on a job, you've got a job the following day, you drop a lens, and that's the lens you're using tomorrow. Have you got enough money on that job to go, that's been catered for, to go and hire another lens? Or are you going to be losing money on that job because you've now got to hire a lens, and you start getting now upset because you're losing money because now you've got other expenses coming in because of a failure that happened. So it's important to also plan that buffer in some of your jobs to cater for if you need to hire something, because these things happen.
Yeah, they do. So basically, fortunately enough, like with the story that I mentioned with my 8200, first and foremost, at that time, with limited knowledge, that I could actually just ship up my unit to Godox SA and trust me, they're very efficient, take little to no time to get us back with our units, regardless of what the issue is. But I had to, that's one of the things that a lot of people don't really realize, is that it's not just a case of just a person doing the shoot, but also I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and one of the things that he asked me is that, tell me something. Do you charge for equipment as well when it comes to the work you do? And initially, then I was like, nah, I don't really. And he said, listen, you should. And I didn't get the significance at the time. And he said, listen, so what happens to your gear in the event that, it breaks on set? And I've had two misfortunes where I've had my 8200 Pro also fall into water as we were shooting, because the wind again blew. And, the person who was supposed to be holding it, because I had someone whom I had asked, they just turned away for that one split second because I think there was a bee or something that they were trying to avoid. And in that split second, the light fell. So I was like, okay, so this one I had not actually budgeted for. So, cost is on me. Whereas with the first one, where I had actually introduced the price, it was then a lot easier to actually just get the unit sorted, because it was a matter of just, okay, let's send it in, got the code, paid it, it was back within a week. It took a week and a half. Yeah, it was done. Yeah. So it's really important. I'd actually say to creatives that look at what you have, look at the longevity, and look at what would happen if you didn't have that. So, like, one of the greatest sort of strategies that I've heard about is also look at, if you were carrying out that particular item, how much would you charge? But you incorporate it into the fee, that it's still something that, on any given day, if ever that happened, you really sort it, because, anything can happen. And, one of the things that clients don't have the patience for is the fact that you can't say, sorry, I can't deliver because something happened to a particular unit. Unfortunately, the reality is that it has absolutely nothing to do with them. They've paid for the time that you had quoted for. They paid for the service that you had quoted for. So, so you can't now say, I've got delays. So, for instance, if you had taken your laptop with, and unfortunately you either dropped it or it has a virus, some do catch on viruses, because that's another thing. How many people actually, have an antivirus,
Yeah.
So also the other thing that at times that you do, like if I have a workshop, I need to factor in and I say, listen, this building that I'm going to be working in, how much am I going to be charged? So if I'm getting charged, let's say 5,000 Rand, so for whatever that people need to pay for the workshop needs to be charged in terms of that. And again, I also need to think again about the equipment. So if ever people are going to be using equipment at the workshop, and, some people at times, like, I'll give an example with the trigger. People just see a trigger. They don't really see there's a symbol there, for the what type of shoe mount is it? Is it Sony? Is it Canon? Is it Nikon? Is it Fuji? And so forth. So people just mount it on anything. And the next thing they unfortunately, damage the unit. So again, when that unit is damaged, how much of you had charged so that it can get fixed? So these are some of the things you sit and actually plan and say, okay, if ever this were to be damaged, this is the amount. If ever, so you also do costing. This is something that I believe that as creatives, we don't do much about, is that we don't do costing sort of exercises, especially when it comes to losses.
Yeah. I think many creatives need to understand that whatever you do, whether it's photography, videography, even anything like that, is you've got to run it as a business. You've got to treat it as a business. Yes, you are a creative and you create things. You create art. You create and it's part of your life. But you have to get the business knowledge in there. And I think it was great. I think Craig actually did a whole business side of it down there in Cape Town on the last event. And I think it's crucial for creatives to actually have that business understanding, because I mean, costs, if I'm doing a shoot and I have to have an independent model, if I have Donna, I maybe cover a petrol money and it's fine. But if I have to go to an agency, it's going to cost me a lot more.
Definitely.
And those things need to be factored into all your costing, your equipment, your talent that you'll be having on the shoot. Anything that you actually need on that shoot there's going to be a cost to it. So just to have that understanding, I can't go and charge 150 Rand for a 1 hour photo shoot and give you 50 edited images. It's not going to work.
Yeah, we come from far. We come from far because I can attest to that. That's literally what I did when I started off photography. I said, okay, it's 150 Rand, and that's a 1 hour photo shoot, and you're going to get about 40 photographs. And then I remember going home and having to edit all of these things. And I'm like thinking, that's 150 Rand. What does it really cover? It doesn't cover much, because there's a lot of things that need to be done. For instance, if you look at the rising cost of fuel, and you charge 150 Rand. And I think one of the things that I've come across, maybe if you've come across it as well, someone will have a quotation for a photo shoot. And one of the things that they will say is, for unlimited photos, you're thinking, what is unlimited? So is it a case that what you're going to do is that you'll take, let's say, 500 photos, and then at which point do you have time to firstly sift through 500 photos, then say, okay, these are my so-called best, and at which point do also have a situation where the client has an involvement in terms of saying, you took these 500 photos, I'm choosing these unlimited ones that I need to have done. So now you think about it, is that you've charged 150 Rand for a shoot, and that was an hour, but the backlog and the delivery time, so that is the biggest thing that I've actually seen, is that when it comes to delivery time, we oversell and over promise. For instance, Matric Dance shoot, I've shot it an hour ago. By 9 p.m., you will have your photos. 9 p.m., you're still on your way back to your own place. 9 p.m., you've just settled down, just had supper. 9 p.m., the reality is that that's just, unfortunately, bad business practice. And because a person wanted to impress, unfortunately, then they oversaw the idea of them saying, I can deliver. But deliverables work, in my case, like this, is that, number one, we talked about the pre-shoot meetings. What is the realistic target that they're looking at? For instance, wedding photography. You can't tell me if you did a wedding this weekend, the following weekend you're delivering. So that's one of the things that I think people need to also get, is that the one thing that we're getting wrong amongst creatives is the promise and overselling ourselves and not really delivering once you've actually said, I can deliver 200 images to you in 3 days. How do you do that?
It can have also the negative effect, because you want to actually, you're saying that to actually look good or make the client all excited and whatever, but you don't deliver. It gives the negative of that. So all of a sudden they'll go and speak. You know what? Word of mouth from a client is probably one of the biggest marketing ploys we could ever have. But the negative side of it is, if you don't deliver, they will tell their friends will tell their friends. And before you know it, you have this name of not being able to deliver because you thought you were trying to impress, and it didn't actually work out that way. So You got to be very careful around, especially around our promises. Normally when they ask me, so when will our images be ready? I said, you know what? I will send you a message in a couple of days, and we will and we will actually make sure you get your images. But in the pre-shoot meetings, as you said just now, if they need the images by a certain time, then I will make a plan and I will get them on a certain time. I mean, as creatives, we work, I think I don't even have between 2 and 3 off in the mornings anymore. I think I'm also busy then. So it's trying to fit everything in. But yeah, it's you got to be very careful. Word of mouth can destroy your business very quickly if you over promise delivery on those things. Something else I wanted to ask is how do you handling last minute cancellations? This is another one. This is another
Right.
one that often gets people.
Yeah. So the big thing around cancellations is this, what, again, it goes back to how we actually do our costing and how we do our pre-shoot meetings. And this is something that is really, a bit of a killer because, again, a person cancels at the last minute. So a question that I normally one has to ask themselves, or I ask myself, is do I make people pay a booking fee? That I explained to them in the pre-shoot meeting that unfortunately in the event that you are unable to make the shoot, then this what is what's going to happen, on the basis that you give again certain stipulations as to what that is, and those terms need to be agreed upon. Unfortunately, again, we have a situation in our society where, as people, because we excited about a booking, we unfortunately find ourselves entangled in a situation where there is a cancellation at the last minute. That is number one. Number two would be a situation where you're not familiar with the space that you're going to shoot in. And, that cancellation that comes through at that time, and you have, let's say, this gear on you, how do you protect it? Because something can go wrong there where, it's been cancelled. And as you walk out, there are people who pounce on it. So I think that's another thing. But definitely one of the things that the way that I do with it is that I need to always have a transparent sort of communication with my client. I always, even a day or so, I send a bit of a reminder. I say, okay, I'm excited about this thing. It's really great to be working with you, and just a message of encouragement. So if someone, let's say, comes down with flu and they tell me that, oh, okay, this is happening, I can do a thing where I can look at the possibility of rescheduling rather than saying, oops, your deposit is gone. Because also, again, being that service provider that's able to say, let's maybe, but this has to be also a special case where, I'll give an example. A person's been in a car accident, a person fell ill and had to be taken to hospital. Those are things, unfortunately, that they themselves couldn't actually, help. That, this is where, unfortunately or fortunately, the humanitarian in you needs to step out rather than the business principle, because business principle says, you didn't come. So therefore, you've canceled on me, so you're not getting it back. But there needs to be that transparency, and I think that when we work with clients who are honest enough, it's easier to deal with that. But when you're working with a client that just wants to be there, because sorry, another thing is that we need to decipher the difference between a photo session and a photo shoot. Because a photo session is that let's take up the camera and just snap around photos as much as we want to. And, they're insignificant in terms of what's happening. But a photo shoot is planned to detail. There's greater planning that goes into it. there's even greater execution. Being able to see the smallest detail that if it's slightly off from the plan, you're able to adjust. So these are the things where I said, when you speak to someone who's interested in a photo shoot, it's a lot easier to deal with a cancellation. But if someone who just wants a photo session, sorry, then that's where you throw the corporate book at them.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there's been a couple of jobs which I've done, which was intense planning. I mean, it was seriously intense planning. It was quite a big shoot. The deposit was paid, and it was cancelled, and then they cancelled the whole idea. They cancelled the project. So what I did was I then looked at what time I actually did spending on prepping, planning, and everything. And then out of that deposit, I took that amount and paid the balance to the client. So I've done things like that as well. So I haven't sort of kept the whole deposit and said, no, sorry, you've cancelled, the project's cancelled. I've just made sure that the time for the planning that I was doing for that project was covered. Because at the end of the day, if I didn't do the job, whatever money is available there, and it was quite a bit, and I literally gave that back to the client. And it was winning a client, basically, because, they can see that you are dealing with integrity. Okay, I can understand your pre-work that you did, and you've been paid for that. The balance has then been paid back. So those type of things. And yes, rescheduling. I think a lot of the personal type shoots that I do, that people do cancel sort of last minute, I do give them the grace to actually reschedule, and then we end up shooting probably a week later or so. So I mean, you have to sort of judge the situation, I think, very carefully, and as you said, the human side of us needs to come out sometimes and actually be gracious, but other times bring out the rule book. Sorry, that's it. But yeah. But
No,
also another thing is the communication, as you mentioned, I think is crucial. And I liked what you brought up, where you're like a few days before the shoot or a week before the shoot, send them a message, almost like building up that excitement for them for the shoot. I think it's a very important thing.
I'll make an
Communication is key.
example just there. So this happened recently. So what happened is that this lady was scheduled to do a maternity shoot. On like literally the hour before we scheduled to do the shoot, she went into labor.
Oh,
So it was a strange thing because, again, it's a natural thing. At times we put in our contracts, if it's a natural disaster, you're still not getting it and whatnot. But the humanitarian side is that, oh, okay, so this happened. We can't avoid someone going into labor. So, then the lady came back to this happened about a month ago. And the lady came back to me this afternoon and said, are you available on Saturday? And I'm like thinking, okay, what's happening Saturday? He's like, okay. Since my maternity shoot didn't happen, is it possible to have, like, it's still a baby shower that we're having, as much as, yes, I've given birth, but we're still going to do a baby shower. So are you able to come through for that? So it goes back to the thing is that what we also put out in the universe has a way of coming back to us and giving back. So, so now this coming Saturday, that's basically what is. This is a person who's come to me and said, they had there was a natural problem. You can't. It's like you can't fight nature. So it's like I wanted to do this baby shower. Post that I want you to do like photos of me and my newborn. So I'm like, oh, okay. So the job is increasing. So. Or because you didn't actually say, just because you gave birth, you still gave respect to that situation and allowed the person to, to heal, have their time with their child, and we had this arrangement. I want to honor it. So the world has a way of giving back to us when we actually, give back to it.
So I think it's keeping and maintaining relationships. I think that is probably a key part to running your photography business, because your clients, and whether it's a corporate, whether it's a commercial type client, or whether it's a pregnant mum, that relationship building between you and them is one of the biggest things I think you can also do. So with all this talk about being human and granting that paperwork, contracts, I have on my website, I've had clients actually ask me for my terms and conditions and for my photography contract. Now, I've actually got those on my website, and I just send them to my clients. If they ask for them, I just send them the link, and they can go and read it. So that's everything to cover for how the images are to be used. Okay, so even with doing like a family photo shoot, specify everything in this contract, because whatever you do, that piece of paper is going to come very important, because it's something that you can fall back on. They've asked to view it. They understand it. They've signed it. Terms and conditions, privacy policies. I've had people ask me about privacy policy because they'll fill in on my website. Where does this information go? How do you use this information? It becomes very much more a business sort of model that us as creatives have sort of got to get used to. Cancellation policies, rescheduling terms, and also payback for cancellations. All these things are going to be covered somewhere in paperwork. As I said, I've got some of those, but how many people out there, all the photographers that are maybe watching online, do you have these things in place? Pakamani, I think we've discussed this before on a couple of other times, I think offline, about contracts and stuff. So did you get your one sorted? Because I think you were busy with one at the time, I think, at that point.
No, as I said in the beginning when we started the interview, is that planning is everything. And if you're creative and respect what the craft really means, planning goes into it. So planning is you planning what you need to do. What is your time like? What is when you're planning costing? So you say to yourself, why am I charging this? Why am I charging that? And, one of the things that a lot of people are afraid to do is being called expensive. The unfortunate thing is that we live in a world and we are part of an industry that requires us to be in a certain bracket, fair enough. But at the same time, being in that bracket, we need to plan and say that this is what needs to also happen, because the business can't survive if you actually planning on just taking the little bit of what, like we spoke about the 150 Rand, so sort of situation, but there's also another spin-off in terms of understanding the other side of business, which is understanding volume over profits, and which maybe would be a nice little discussion for another business sort of seminar in terms of what is actually happening in terms of the business side of photography, so the business talk. But planning is key. And unfortunately, if we don't plan, then we're always going to be sort of in the disgruntlement zone where we say photography is expensive. I can't do this, I can't do. But it's all in the detail. It was also the type of client that you are attracting, the type of client that when they call you, you are able to adequately service. And when we talk about adequate service, is that, do you understand client needs? Do you understand what it means to have a contract in place, have an agreement in place, or what happens in the event that Unfortunately, some people when they shoot, they immediately back up their stuff as they just finishing they shoot, and because the question I think that we never delved into is what happens when you use that one wrong SD card that just stops. So this is where a lot. I'm fortunate enough to have a dual card slot in terms of the camera that I use. So if one goes wrong, and fortunately, there's a greater chance that I will have backup with the other one. So this is the one thing that I enjoy the most. But again, it goes back to your planning and what you want out of the shoot and what you eventually put on the table as what the client can get. Because if I don't have that backup, what happens? And I think that is one of the greatest challenges is that if you're shooting, let's say, a wedding and that happens, you can't go back to the moments where everything needed to be done. If you're shooting, let's say, client portfolio work, again, depending on how commercial that particular shoot is, because if let's say you're shooting for a brand like Godox SA and Godox has entrusted you as a photographer to take the pictures and your memory card goes poof, how do you say to then Godox SA, sorry, I need to reshoot, because there's a cost involved, because we talked about the costing of a building, we talked about the costing of, let's say, an independent model. So this is not just a friend that's just coming through to help you out. This is a person coming from an agency. We talked about also a makeup artist coming in, and we could talk about someone who's doing wardrobe. So we must not just look at the fact that, okay, here I am, I'm holding the camera, I have the light. On the other hand, let's look at also the production team that makes it all happen. And then that SD card, how much of you is actually planning on that? Because
you're putting too much trust.
It's one of the things that we don't talk about as photographers or creatives, is
maybe because we
don't want when it comes
we
to
don't want we don't want to let that one out into the atmosphere.
It's crazy,
Yeah, that is. I mean, I think with studio, because I'm always shooting mainly in studio, even if I go to a client, like I did all these trophies for a client, I'm shooting tethered. So I'm actually making sure that it's actually going to drives and to my local and to my SD cards. And I'm making sure after the day, halfway even through the day, I was actually backing up those folders onto another drive, because I do not want to shoot 2,000 trophies again because it was like crazy. But yeah, I think we put a lot of faith in that piece of plastic.
The other thing is also having the wrong USB cable, because then you get the charging one only, and then the one that can actually do data transfer. And let's say you've only got the charging one and you don't have one that actually is like for dual purposes. And also choosing I love the L ones at the that you actually put in terms of the cables, because there's somewhat of protection that is there versus the one that can just pop out, and like, if let's say if you're trying to do tethering and unbeknownst to you that it's not plugged into the PC, it's plugged into the camera, and that sort of thing. So certain variables that come through, and it's Murphy's law. I think that's what we've been discussing today, and how we take Murphy's law for granted is absolutely insane. Because I mean, what's the worst that can happen? And then boom, it happens.
Yeah. Because
so yeah,
I've also heard of people when they're tethering, because you can actually write to your external drive, and not record onto the card. So you
Mm.
can actually do that. Now, that is, to me, is also dangerous, because if the drive fails, at least you got your SD card. So when you're tethering, you must make sure that you're actually writing to both areas, the card and to the disk, because it's like your dual slot.
You know.
So I've seen that happen to some people as well. So just whenever you're doing that, make sure you are writing wherever you can write. When you click that button, make sure it's writing wherever you can possibly write, because to have no images. Nah, no, I've heard some scary stories, but that's for another
Yep.
time.
You know.
I think on that one. And I think we touched on a couple of things with the late arrivals or no showers, prevention strategies on that. Unprepared models.
Pardon?
Unprepared models. So, say for instance,
Oh, yo, that is, yeah.
just to take one of the things was they book a shoot. It's a portfolio shoot, and I said, "Look, are you wanting us to arrange a makeup artist where they can do the makeup artist? Because we need to arrange that time in studio for you to get your makeup done." Okay, no, that's fine. No, she'll do her own. Okay, I say, cool. So we only then book for the hour for the shoot, and then she comes, no makeup's done. So now she spends half an hour, 45 minutes doing makeup. So I said, well, now you've only got 15 minutes left to shoot.
Right.
How'd you handle that type of?
You see, that's the thing about it is that firstly, the education around understanding the difference between doing a photo session and doing a photo shoot. So, for instance, this comes up a lot when it comes to also doing, let's say, a matric dance photo shoot. So, again, it's a situation that most matric dance happen in winter. And by roughly about 5:30, there's virtually no light to really work with, even if you are using off-camera flash. But, there is a bit of struggle that a person really has. So one of the best ways that I would say handle it is that, number one, in your prep you have before the shoot, let's talk about the following things. One, who's making the dress? Two, where's the makeup being done? Three, where's the venue that we are shooting at? And what is the distance between where the makeup is being done, where the person is dressing up, and where we are shooting? So my advice is always, let's plan backwards. What time are we shooting? We're shooting at 4:15 in the afternoon. Brilliant. What time's your makeup that needs to be done? Your makeup is being done roughly at about latest by 2 p.m. Who's fetching your dress? All right. So and so is bringing the dress. So that's where you're getting dressed. So if you are 5 minutes away, considering traffic as well, that's where you need to be, so that at 4 p.m. we are shooting. If by latest there is a bit of a glitch, then I know that, okay, 4:05, 4:10, we're starting without fail. So these are some of the things that, we need to plan like that. But now in the event that, it happens like that, you again have two options. One, there's the humanitarian side of you that says, oh, okay, it's fine. But the problem is that you don't want to also create an impression that it's okay to be late. Because I always have a thing that says, look at when it comes to check in for a flight. If you miss it, so you're not going to be a situation where it's only 2 minutes. Yeah, it's only 2 minutes, but if you look at all the prepping that goes into just one flight, the mere fact that they'll normally say check in 2 hours into the airport before your flight goes off, and you're thinking, what are you going to do in 2 hours? But if you look at the various things and stages you have to go through into an airport, that is just domestic. We're not even talking international. International, they tell you 3-4 hours before a flight, you need to be at the airport and doing your check-in and everything. And you are thinking, okay, I need to be fast early because also the traffic, I don't know whether there'll be an accident, there'll be whatever the case is that's going to happen. So I always say treat a photo shoot prep in terms of time similar to what you do to a flight. So that's why I say you plan backwards so that you are able to counter this. But now when it happens, you are in a situation where number one is that you can do the shoot. Number two, also make sure that as a photographer, you have not overbooked yourself, because what happens at times is that you find a person is that I need to be in Braamfontein at 4:30. I need to be in, let's say, Lenceria side by 5 p.m., but you didn't actually calculate transport time to move there. So those are some of the errors that we make on our end, as much as clients also make their errors in terms of time. So in balancing out the scales, we need to plan more, and we also need to educate our clients, because I think that's where the failure also comes in. Who's educating the client? And pre-shoot meetings, that's where the education comes in. And also the other big thing that I also feel needs to also happen, that at times there's a bit of an oversight that happens on our side as creatives, is especially if you're dealing with a minor, the parents play a role. That minor has parents, be male, be it female, they have parents. And we need to deal with parents, not the minors. Because with minors, time for them means absolutely nothing. Because I mean, a person could be late for a class and it's like, it's just going to be detention. But now, what's your detention as a creative? So when you speak to a parent, you're saying, 5 is 5, ma'am. And they're like, okay, 5 is 5, sir. We'll make sure that our child is ready. So those are some of the perks that also come into it, is that let's be cognizant about the fact that when we communicate, do these pre-shoots as well, especially when it comes to minors, that we are dealing with parents, because parents play a very big role. Also, again, with modeling agencies, they'll also remind you, parent.
Like, I mean, there's always certain things we can put in. I mean, even with the pre-shoot meetings, as you said, I mean, it's an important part. But having some essential items on set, like we have MAC makeup kits in the cupboard in the studio. So if there's certain things that the model's forgotten, or anyone's forgotten, or they need some touch up on their makeup and they've left their makeup behind, things like that, we've actually got in studio. Can you believe it? We got MAC makeups in a cupboard in the studio here. So just in case, just to cater for that type of thing. Another thing is also very interesting. I know it's probably just gone over the hour and stuff, is personality clashes. Like,
the crazy thing about personality clashes is the fact that they happen quite often. And it's also a case where someone just comes up to you and says, I just want a photographer. And so, for instance, now this is a controversial one that it happens. So the person's makeup has been done, and especially at times when you're using off-camera flash, and you take that first photo and you're like, we're going to have to work here. And for a person like me who doesn't do retouching and all of that, it becomes an extremely big challenge, because, how do you fix it? How do you balance it? I had a situation here in March where it looked a situation like a tinge of more yellow towards rather than skin blending of sorts that was being done with makeup. So now I had to really scratch my head, because I can't say to a client, your makeup is kind of doing ABC. I need to be creative enough to actually, when they get their photos, they're like, you know what, this guy did the things. He found the pots. But now how do you, because I've asked this question before on Facebook, and majority of creatives agreed, you just keep your cool, don't say it. And find a way around it. But then what if the person really finds that, yes, it was not your fault as a photographer because you captured what was available and in front of you. Then you do get some of those. And then you get some of those who tell you and say, hang on, so you just came for the money. And I remember, you get people who say, will you be able to Photoshop this? I'm not a Photoshopper. I'm not good at it. I am always honest about that I'm not, that sort of person. So yeah, we'd often clash to a point. Like, I'll give an example now. I did, I was supposed to have done a wedding this past weekend, which I didn't do. And the reason I didn't do it is, again, personality clashes. The way that, firstly, the demand that the client had when they approached me, I already said something that was off. Then, second to that, the fiance, husband to be, also contacted me, and so now we were clashing because his first statement was, I didn't like the way that you spoke to my fiance. You are a photographer and you seemingly available at the time that we need you. How can we proceed with the talk? That was the conversation. So immediately I already felt that, listen, if I proceed with this, we are not going to agree on anything because there's already great animosity. There's already a thing where they have this perception of me, I have this perception of them. And even if I were to do the shoot, even if it's a pre-meeting, even with the pre-meeting, we are definitely still going to have a clash. So the best thing for me was, let me, step aside. And I think this is the one thing that we as creatives don't really do, which is, when we see these clashes, we don't step aside, we persist with it, but then we still want to have a problem when the person says, I'm going to give you a 0 rating because I didn't like what you did.
Yeah.
And you knew that it might happen, but you still went on with it. So you can't exactly say you're blaming the client. I'll blame you as the creative because there's something you could definitely have avoided there.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I've, as I mentioned, I did the Sunbabes shoots for the Sunday Sun for a couple of years. And we had all types coming in for the studio, so that they submit, and then we pick sort of 5, and they come through. Some of them come through with makeup on, which was like, my word, no, we cannot shoot you like this, because we do have that very yellow face and very sort of red colored body. So they've got the two tones. The head is a different color than the actual body. And because they were shot in bikinis, you saw the differences straight away. So we had to make a plan. And I actually then got my wife, who's a qualified makeup artist, to actually do all the makeups, because the tension when this lady had eyebrows up here somewhere painted on, and it was like, no, we cannot shoot you like this, I promise. And they used to get upset. They used to really get upset because they thought it looked cool. And I'm thinking, no, 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 no. I said, you know what? I'm going to step back. I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee. I'm going to get my wife to come and explain. And she was sort of explaining to them why we do this and everything else. And it's also, when they rock up for a shoot in a studio or off-camera flash, even on location, and they have a foundation that's got more reflective material than your reflector, that is also a nightmare. So some of these makeups are, and then you try and explain to them, we need to remove your makeup. And it also creates tension and stuff like that. But it's a case of just keeping calm, even if you do have to step away for just a couple of minutes. Say, look, let me just go and speak to the makeup artist. Let's see what we can do. Because half the time it's really a it's really interesting what happens in those type of things, and it could be as small as your eyebrows, you know. But I think it's
I think
being
the signal's
professional.
breaking there. So
Is it
yeah.
okay?
Okay.
Can
It's
you?
okay. Yeah.
So
Can you
it's
come
about
again?
maintain. So it's about maintaining professionalism, because even if it is about the eyebrows that are totally whacked on and it's not looking good, you've got to explain to them why it's not looking good. And if you can't do that, then rather speak to your makeup artist or your stylist and get them to sort of maybe explain and why you go and have a cup of coffee or something, because those tensions can, and it does affect the shoot, because now this person's got to stand in front of you while you're pointing a camera at them, and you've had an issue about their eyebrows, and they just think you were, they just thought you were gunning for them because of this, you know. So it creates that stiffness between you and the client, and you're not really getting very creative. So there's small things like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be big, and it can be
Mm.
little small things that can really, really, really cause an issue. But so I think maybe in conclusion, so I think what came out of this is pre-shoot meetings is one of the big ones on that. Making sure you actually price correctly for your jobs, whether it's a standard type photo shoot, whether it's commercial, corporate, price
Mm.
accordingly. Make sure that your equipment is at least covered. I mean, what I often do is I would go into a hiring, camera body hiring. How much would it cost me to hire a 60? It cost me 400 Rand to hire the 60. Okay, well, then I must incorporate that type of stuff in my price. Make sure you're pricing, because you'll be a much happier photographer when you're making money.
Mm.
Because when you go back home and you think, oh, it was only 500 Rand, and now I've got to sit for 3 hours doing editing, you're not a happy photographer. You're not a happy creative if you're doing that. Make money, you'll be a very happy creative. And I think maintaining, remember who you are. You're representing your business. I mean, we also, with the Godox SA, we're representing Godox SA.
Mm.
We got to be top of the game, professional, keeping cool, just maintaining that professionalism. Doesn't matter how big or small the job is, always
Mm.
be a
Mm.
professional. And
Definitely.
what else was there? Yeah, another one that I like that you mentioned is pre the shoot. Phone the client, WhatsApp the client, really excited. Build that excitement between you and your client. Build that thing, because that's where your trust comes in. And if you get trust with a client, you've got a client for life. Even if you
Mm.
have to contract out another photographer to do that shoot for them, they have that trust. You've built that trust with that client, and you've got them as a client forever. So yeah, I think those type of things, cancellations, getting some paperwork in
Mm.
place, having a backup list of models. If you're shooting with a lot of models, make sure you have a backup list. Just get hold of some of the models that you do know. Ask if they'd be
Mm.
interested in doing this type of thing. Build up a list, because then you know what, I can go and speak to Anzel, or I can go and speak to Donna. Oh, Jean Marie will be able to do that. And have that proper backup list. Be prepared for your planning and everything else. And I think from that side, I think that was a lot of the things that
Mm.
I get out of it is plan. You can, I mean, those who don't plan to fail. That's what they
Yeah.
say.
And don't make your lack
So
of planning someone else's emergency.
yeah, that's another one. So I think from my side, I think that's about it. And if there's anything else, any questions out there, I'm just looking on the. There's no questions on there that I can see. And we're obviously 1 hour, 14 minutes over. But Pakamani, thanks for stepping in and being in my emergency recovery plan from the live shoot being rescheduled. But hopefully, if all goes to plan, next week we will be doing the gel shooting, and we should have some fun in studio. But I've enjoyed it. I think it's good to actually get some of this stuff out of your head, and maybe some of the people out there haven't even thought of some of the stuff. So I think it's good to sort of blurt it out and get them thinking. But yeah, so I think that is about it from my side. Anything from your side? Anything else, Pakamani, before we log off?
Yeah, so from my side, I just want to say, you know what, guys, things happen. You know, we can plan everything to the T, but things happen. And when Murphy's Law strikes, just take a deep breath and remember why you're doing what you're doing, how you'd initially planned it, and most importantly, knowing that, you know, you can still get it right. So don't say, oh, the weather is what's happened, or person into labor, so therefore shoot, and so forth. So always remember to be courteous as a person, and planning is everything.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So that's it, guys. I just want to also just mention on stuff that actually is happening at Godox SA. Obviously, any events, and I know Pakamani will want you guys to make sure you get online for the free training in areas, because I think yours is an area that's planned for next day. I think the Eastern Cape is the to get out there to get some free basic training. So make sure you register for any of the events. It's actually online at godox.co.za, and free basic training. Anybody in those areas that are out there, get hold of your buddies, get hold of your friends, register online. Let's get the numbers in so we can actually arrange an awesome training weekend at your area, or close by to your area. I think it's important to see exactly what Godox SA is all about. And I think anything that you also require, you can actually go to godox.co.za. You can use my coupon code, and everybody in the Western Cape. Pakamani, what is your code? What is your product, your coupon code, Pakamani?
You just broke away just there for a second, just at the end.
Okay. I say for all the guys in the Eastern Cape, what is your coupon code for godox.co.za?
Right. Yeah, for my side, my coupon code, if you're buying from Godox SA, just there type in Godox Pakamani, and you will actually get a nice little discount there. It's guaranteed. And yeah, it's Godox all the way. Orange Army.
Yeah. And then also Golden Power batteries. You can also get lacquer savings on Golden Power batteries. I get all my backgrounds, all my paper backgrounds. I even get my stands, my gels, everything from GP batteries. And you can use my code there also to get an instant discount. But guys, whatever you do, don't forget the free basic training. Start going onto the site, registering. Get your buddies registering, get your family registering. Get there. It's fun, and it's an enjoyable weekend that the Godox actually do, and they put a lot of effort, and there's a lot of talent that actually comes on those weekends. So I think that's about it. Cheers, everybody, for now, and we will catch you online again next week. As I said, if everything is planned well and everything goes well, we will be doing the gel shoot, and it should be a lot of fun. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Cheers for now.
All right, have a good evening.